More than half a century ago, Tolkien created a vast fantasy world filled with interesting, vivid characters. Despite Middle-earth being inhabited by many powerful races, humans have always been somewhat separate. Humans were always different from elves, dwarves, and other races of Middle-earth due to their willingness to help and their remarkable bravery in battle. The human race greatly influenced the shaping of the era, not least because of their conquests and conflicts. Ultimately, it was the humans who were corrupted by the rings, allowing Sauron to enslave the 9 great human kings, setting off the chain of events most familiar to fans of The Lord of the Rings. Despite this, humans united against Sauron's power once again, and although victory was not always on their side, they never stopped fighting. Here I present the 10 strongest and most powerful humans of the famous saga. Grima Wormtongue is known to fans as the advisor to King Theoden of Rohan, hopelessly in love with his niece, Owen. At the same time, Grima betrayed the people and secretly served Saruman, the powerful wizard corrupted by Sauron before the War of the Ring. This character was not physically strong and incapable of handling weapons, but his persuasive words enslaved King Theoden's mind. In the books, there is no direct evidence of this, although dialogues suggest that Grima may have used special poisons to age Theoden prematurely. Theoden was a strong and healthy king who often led his troops, but Grima convinced him that his days as a warrior were over. Grima took the king's sword, Hedogrim, and locked it in a chest. The deceitful advisor used all his eloquence and powers of persuasion to influence the king's decisions. Theoden's mind was clouded, and he came to depend on Grima's counsel. However, Grima was exposed by Gandalf, fled Rohan, and openly sided with Saruman. Nevertheless, his subsequent brief life can hardly be considered happy. Saruman's humiliating treatment stripped Grima of his dignity and human appearance. In his final days, he crawled on all fours and only went outside at night. Eventually, unable to bear his master's abuse, Grima killed Saruman, only to be shot dead immediately afterward. Denethor was the last ruling steward of Gondor. He governed Gondor for 35 years, protecting its lands and people from the growing threats of Sauron. Denethor was a brilliant political leader, placing the state above all else. However, he also loved his power and was unwilling to share it, even with his sons, let alone with Aragorn, whom he considered a descendant of a disgraced lineage. Denethor was the first man since the last kings of Gondor to use a palantir. The steward had a strong will, and he managed to keep control over the Anor Stone, while preventing Sauron from seeing through the Ithil Stone. The price for this was extremely high. Denethor aged prematurely. Sauron could not break the steward's will or corrupt him like Saruman, but he still manipulated Denethor, undermining his spirit by showing him the might of Barad-dûr and convincing him of inevitable defeat. During the War of the Ring, Denethor was driven to despair by the loss of his elder beloved son, Boromir, which was only worsened by visions of Gondor's inevitable fall, shown to him by Sauron through the Palantir. The steward's younger son, Faramir, could not fill the void in his father's heart, and when Faramir was poisoned by one of the Nazgûl, Denethor fell into despair and secluded himself in the White Tower, sitting with his dying son and gazing into the Palantir, while Sauron's armies burned his city. Although Gandalf and Pippin managed to save Faramir, whom Denethor tried to burn alive, believing his son's wounds to be fatal, the steward completely lost his sanity. He took a torch from his loyal servant, climbed onto the burning pyre, and declared with laughter that he knew the overwhelming number of enemy forces, and even if men won the battle today, the war was already lost. Denethor broke his staff of office, threw it into the fire, and then burned alive with the Palantir on his chest. Once, Isildur was one of the greatest kings of Gondor, playing a key role in the history of Middle-earth, as his actions sparked the entire subsequent story. In the last alliance of elves and men, Isildur led his army in battle against the forces of the Dark Lord Sauron. At that time, Sauron, still capable of taking physical form, possessed the One Ring, which granted him almost unlimited power. In that battle, many fell, including Gil-galad, the king of Noldor in exile, and Elendil, High King of the Dúnedain, and Isildur's father, whose sword, Narsil, was broken. Isildur took up his father's broken sword and struck Sauron's hand, severing the finger that bore the ring. Sauron's physical form was sustained only by the ring's magic, and the Dark Lord was vanquished. His spirit was forced to flee and hide, waiting for an opportunity to take shape again. The One Ring ended up in the hands of Isildur's heir. Elrond and Círdan pleaded in vain for Isildur to destroy the ring by casting it into the fires of Mount Doom, where it was forged. However, no one, not even Sauron himself, could bring themselves to destroy or discard the ring. Such was its power, to seduce with the promise of limitless might. Isildur believed he could use the ring for good, keeping it as a hereditary treasure of the Northern Kingdom, but later realized he had been deceived. The king's will was unyielding, and while the ring tormented his mind, it did not prevent Isildur from accomplishing many great deeds. However, at the beginning of the Third Age, Isildur was slain by orcs. His body was never found, and the One Ring was thought lost at that time. Elendil was the leader of the surviving Númenóreans, High King of Gondor and Arnor, King of all Dúnedain, and heir to the royal dynasty of Númenor. Like his father, Elendil led the faithful Númenóreans, those who wished to maintain friendship with the Valar and elves, and who resisted Sauron's influence, refusing to follow King Ar-Pharazôn, who sought to wage war against Valinor. Elendil survived the downfall of Númenor and sailed with the other faithful to the shores of Middle-earth, where they established Gondor and Arnor. When Sauron attacked Gondor, Elendil formed the last alliance of elves and men with the Elven High King and his old friend Gil-galad to confront the Dark Lord. In a long and brutal battle, the armies of Gil-galad and Elendil prevailed, and they marched into Mordor, laying siege to Barad-dûr. During the siege, Elendil's son, Anarion, was killed. Eventually, Sauron came out to face those who had dared to challenge him. Elendil and his loyal friend Gil-galad fought the Dark Lord on the slopes of Mount Doom and defeated him, though they themselves were slain in the battle, and Elendil's sword, Narsil, was broken. However, Elendil's son, Isildur, avenged his father and brother by cutting off Sauron's finger, which bore the One Ring. The younger brother of Gondor's famed hero, Boromir, Faramir lived in his brother's shadow even after his death. Though Faramir never succeeded in becoming a worthy heir in the eyes of his father, Denethor, the last steward of Gondor, he still sought his father's respect and love, even joining an unequal battle against Sauron's forces, led by one of the Nazgûl, which Faramir barely survived. Faramir first appears in the story when he encounters Frodo and Sam, realizing they are the hobbits from his prophetic dream. However, when he learns that there were 7 companions, including his brother Boromir, and that Frodo bears the legendary ring, which his father covets, Faramir resists the ring's temptation and helps the hobbits find refuge, knowing full well that his father would not commend his decision. Faramir still releases Frodo and Sam, providing them with supplies and water, and warning them of the dangers ahead. "You need not fear. I would not take this thing, even if it lay by the roadside. If Minas Tirith fell and I alone could save it, I would not use the weapon of the Dark Lord for glory. Such glory I do not desire, Frodo, son of Drogo." Faramir, who sought no glory and preferred to remain in the shadows, fought for Gondor and his people alongside his company of rangers. Later, Faramir was mortally wounded during the retreat from Osgiliath and nearly died at the hands of his own father, who, in his madness, intended to burn both himself and his son in the tombs of their ancestors. However, Faramir survived, and afterward, in the Houses of Healing, he met the wounded Owen, Princess of Rohan, who became his wife after the war ended. Owen, the niece of the King Theoden of Rohan, was an excellent rider and skilled with a sword since childhood. She lost her parents early and stayed with her uncle. She spent many years caring for Theoden, who, under Saruman's influence, grew weaker and more passive. After Gandalf exposed Grima and restored Theoden's mind and will, Owen opposed her uncle's wish to keep her in the rear with women and children. She disguised herself as a man and joined the army on the battlefield. Despite the chaos and panic on the Pelennor fields, Owen fearlessly protected the king, fighting Sauron's most terrifying servant, the Witch King of Angmar, whom she managed to defeat, fulfilling the prophecy that no mortal man could kill the Witch King. Owen felt a strong affection for Aragorn at first sight, but his heart belonged to another. However, after the victory over the forces of Mordor in the Houses of Healing, Owen met the wounded son of the Steward of Gondor, Faramir, with whom she eventually united her fate and became the Lady of Ithilien. Boromir, a great commander of Gondor, was Denethor's firstborn and his beloved son. Despite his father's favoritism towards him over Faramir, there was never any enmity between the brothers, and Boromir always protected and supported his younger brother. The night after the Battle of Osgiliath, Boromir and his brother had the same dream, hearing an obscure prophecy about the reforging of Elendil's broken sword, Narsil, in Imladris, and the doom of Isildur that a halfling would take upon himself. At his father's urging, Boromir went to Rivendell to solve the prophecy. At the Council of Elrond, Boromir argued that the ring should be used against Sauron to defeat the Dark Lord with minimal losses, but his proposal was not accepted. Boromir joined the Fellowship of the Ring, accompanying Frodo on the journey to Mordor, courageously protecting his companions. Boromir was indeed one of the best warriors in Middle-earth. However, the ring's power managed to take hold of his mind, and Boromir tried to take the ring from Frodo, hoping to use it to revive his once great people. Boromir realized the horror of what happened when the veil lifted from his eyes. After this, Frodo decided it would be safer for the group to be far from the ring and fled, intending to journey to Mordor alone. The heroes were then attacked by orcs and tormented by guilt. Boromir bravely defended the hobbits, Merry and Pippin, from the attack. The enemy was too numerous, and Boromir saved the hobbits by holding off the orcs, but was mortally wounded. Boromir was the only member of the Fellowship who fought the ring's power and succumbed to it, only to then heroically perish. Before dying, he confessed what happened between him and Frodo to Aragorn, who arrived in time and died with words of repentance. Although Theoden first appears as a frail, weak old man, his mind and body poisoned by Grima's insidious words, it is revealed that these were merely spells through which Saruman had taken control of the king's mind. Once Gandalf broke the enchantment and exposed the deceitful advisor, Grima, Theoden regained his former strength and once again embodied the powerful, proud king of his people. Despite the long-standing Cold War with Gondor, Theoden answered the call for aid and fulfilled the oath of Earl, marching to help Gondor, besieged by the forces of Mordor. At the decisive moment, the riders of Rohan broke the siege around Minas Tirith and crushed Sauron's forces. Theoden participated in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, inspiring his warriors, but suffered defeat at the hands of the Witch King, who struck down his faithful steed with his magic. The only person nearby to avenge the king was his niece, Owen, who shielded Theoden from certain death. Theoden was still alive long enough to say farewell to Merry and give his blessing to Omar, the new ruler of Rohan. Omar was a valiant warrior and an experienced ranger who would later become a great king. He always remained loyal to his uncle, King Theoden, despite Grima Wormtongue's efforts. At the start of the War of the Ring, Omar patrolled the kingdom's perimeter with his cavalry, protecting it from orcs, who grew bolder as Sauron's power increased. Contrary to the orders of the bewitched king, who deemed it foolish to pursue a sighted orc troop, Omar acted on his own and attacked the orcs, who by coincidence were transporting the captured Merry and Pippin to Saruman. The hobbits managed to escape, and Omar destroyed the enemy. Later, his cavalry met the remaining members of the Fellowship of the Ring, led by Aragorn, who were tracking the hobbits. By the laws of Rohan, Omar had no right to allow the three strangers to pass without the king's permission, but he let them continue. Moreover, he gave them the horses of two of his fallen riders, asking them to justify his trust and return the horses to the stables of Erebus. Of course, such defiance could not go unnoticed, and Omar was stripped of his command and placed under arrest, labeled a traitor. He remained there until Gandalf dispelled the enchantment cast on the king. During the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Omar took command of the cavalry after Theoden's death and led a charge to the south, where he joined Aragorn's forces. After the war ended, Omar renewed the Oath of Orl, cementing the alliance between Gondor and Rohan, and accepted the crown, becoming the ruler of the proud Rohirrim. Aragorn was the last chieftain of the Dúnedain and a direct descendant of Isildur, the last High King of Arnor and Gondor. When his father was killed by orcs, Aragorn was taken to the sanctuary of Elrond, the Lord of the Elves. In his childhood, Aragorn's mother made Elrond swear not to reveal Aragorn's lineage to anyone, fearing he would be killed if his heritage as the heir to the royal line was known. Aragorn himself only learned his true name and family history at the age of 20, choosing to live in obscurity, returning to the north to join the remnants of his Dúnedain people. Aragorn traveled extensively, served the king of Rohan and the steward of Gondor, and was loved and respected by rulers of both elves and men. Gandalf called Aragorn the greatest ranger and hunter of this age. Aragorn was known as Strider in the regions around the Shire, which he watched over with his rangers at Gandalf's request, as the wizard was concerned about Bilbo, who possessed the ring at that time. The magical ring could only be destroyed by casting it into the fires of Orodruin in Mordor. Frodo set out on this quest with the Fellowship of the Ring, and Aragorn joined them. Aragorn achieved many feats to further the group's goal. He was a great warrior and leader. After the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Omar and Imrahil said that with Aragorn at their side, one could emerge unharmed even in the thick of battle. One of Aragorn's most memorable actions was his journey to the paths of the dead. He summoned the army of the dead to defend Gondor, promising to lift their curse and grant them peace if they fought one final battle for him, as only he, Elessar, the heir of Isildur, the great king of Gondor, could do. The dead heeded Aragorn's call, followed him, and attacked the corsair ships anchored at the port of Pelargir. With the help of the army of the dead, Aragorn broke the blockade of Gondor and, deeming their oath fulfilled, released the spirits. After the ring was destroyed and the age ended, as foretold, Aragorn, the heir of an ancient king, ascended the throne and married Elrond's daughter, Arwen, who chose a happy marriage with her beloved over eternal life. And that's all from me. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Your engagement is the best reward for me. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Goodbye.